Genesis, and I wanted to come back and finish our study of Genesis at this point. If you remember that you have in Genesis 6 through 9, ultimately a picture of the flood. There is great wickedness that comes over the earth, and so what God does is He is going to destroy the whole world, but Noah finds favor in the eyes of the Lord. And once the earth is then destroyed by water, God makes a promise that He'll never destroy the world by water again, that as long as there is sun and there are planets and all of that, that there are going to be people on the earth, and that God then will not destroy the world in that way. The picture in the middle of chapter 9 of the book of Genesis then is what you would call then ultimately a new hope. Because what you have is that the wickedness has been eradicated. The people have been destroyed. That's really the ultimate picture that has been given here. And with wickedness destroyed, with the people now being destroyed by God and judged by God because their wickedness was even in the intentions of their minds and hearts, we would suppose that this time it's going to go differently. This time, as Noah and his family are told to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, it's going to go differently this time, right? That's going to be the logical idea that happens. But immediately, the scene that is given for us in Genesis 9 and in verse 18, we see that Noah and his sons, and they are spreading out and they are multiplying. And it says in verse 20 that Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. And he drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both of their shoulders, and walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Let's stop there in the middle of the scene. After God is wiping out wickedness and Noah has found favor in the sight of God, immediately we see all kinds of problems happen. Noah becomes a farmer and plants the soil. He has grapes, he makes wine, and he gets drunk. And all throughout the scriptures, drunkenness is condemned. But that's really not the highlight of the text. It's really the response. As Noah is laying naked, uncovered there in his tent, it says there that Ham goes in and sees his father's condition and goes back out and tells all his brothers about it. And the idea, I think, that is being pictured here is this snickering delight that Ham has to go and tell his brothers, look at what our father did. Look, he got drunk and he's laying there naked in the tent. And rather than doing something about it, Ham decides to go tell his two brothers about it. And ultimately then, because of this spectacle that Noah has made, Ham sins because he's not honoring his father at this moment. You will notice it's the other two brothers who honor their father, Shem and Japheth. They take this robe, this large robe, and they put it on their shoulders and walk backward in to be able to cover him up, showing the proper honor and respect of their father. Now, why is all that there? Except to show, even after God utterly floods the world and destroys wickedness from the planet, as long as there's humans, there's going to be sin. You would think this would be the new hope. It's the fresh start. We're going to get going. It's going to be a completely different world now. Everybody's learned their lesson to obey God and to not sin and not go into wickedness and not be selfish, but we're going to obey God now. You can imagine what Noah and his sons would have been teaching their families, right? But don't forget what just happened. We were all on a boat for over a year because of sin. You can imagine how that was told. And yet the message that's being given to us is that as long as there are humans, there's going to be sin. There is none who is righteous. There's not one. All have sinned and fallen of the glory of God. This is the big problem that is being described. And it is interesting that even with as few people as we have, that the text is indicating to us it's just Noah and his family, and yet how easy it is to be caught up and begin to act like the world again. That Ham would not be interested in covering his father, but rather wants to go and make fun of his father to the brothers and say, well, you won't believe what he did. And the other two are completely put off by that, rightly so. But this is the essence of what we're going to see as Genesis begins to round out, is a choice has to be made about whether we are going to continue with evil and overcome evil with good. Now, the title of the lesson is Pride Problems. And I wanted to bring in chapter 9 because we're going to see how it connects to this idea in chapter 10 and in chapter 11. That ultimately, what we see the issue being is the issue of pride. Now, if you have your Bible, I'd like for you to look at chapter 10. And you might look at Genesis chapter 10 and say, that's not a chapter I want to read. As you look at it, and all that you start seeing are a bunch of name upon name upon name upon name. And if you get started in your reading through the Bible account, probably one of the first things you do is you get to chapter 10 and you go, okay, there's a lot of names, chapter 11, please, let's move on with the story. Chapter 10, though, is a very important chapter that we need to summarize, because what chapter 10 is doing is describing where everybody ultimately came from, and more importantly, where all the languages came from. If you have the time and you went through chapter 10, you would notice there's not a lot of names of individuals, just a handful. What you are reading are nations and peoples. These are people groups that are being described in chapter 10. And so what is suddenly being described for us is, well, here's where all the people ended up. And for some reason, they are dividing out. For example, in verses 2 through 5, he describes the offspring of Japheth all staying together as a group and inhabiting the European and Mediterranean areas. And then it describes the offspring of Ham, who are then occupying and staying together in the African and in the Palestinian areas. And then the offspring of Shem are described in verses 21 to 31, and they are all occupying the Arabian and Middle Eastern area. In fact, at the end of each of the sons' genealogies of nations, it says that they spread out in their own lands, by their clans, by their languages, by their lands, and by their nations. 3 times at the end of each of them. These groups were spread out, and they stayed in their own lands, and they had their own languages, and they stayed in their own clans within those nations. And what the sense of chapter 10 is to intend for the reader to do is go, why did that happen? Why are Noah's descendants spreading out all over the place? And why are they not intermingling? And why are they staying in their own territories? And why do they have different languages? That's what chapter 11 then goes about explaining. You ever watched a movie sometimes that does that, or a TV show, where it shows you the end at the beginning, and you go, this is weird. And then all of a sudden it goes, okay, now back, 48 hours earlier. And then you start watching how it led up to that. That's what's happening right here. Chapter 10 is the outcome. It's saying, here's how everything ended up after the flood. Everybody's everywhere, and they're confining themselves in certain borders, in certain regions, by their certain languages. How did that happen? Reverse. Chapter 11, verse 1. At the time, the whole earth had one language and the same words. Verse 2. The people migrated from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. Now, have you ever read that and went, Why are we talking about that? Hey, everybody, let's burn bricks and let's make bricks. You need to read that in terms of new technology. That's what's happening right here. If we were to put in our terminology, they have come up with a new way of bricks so that, you see the rest of verse 3, they have the bricks for stone, bitumen, and mortar. And thus, because of this new technology, they say, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. Notice they're saying, we have come up with a way to build the biggest building. And we are going to build a big city, and we are going to build a big tower, and it's going to reach high into the sky. And what's going to happen is people are going to see that, and they're going to praise us, and we're going to make this name for ourselves. And in this way, we will never be scattered or dispersed across the earth. In essence, the humans rise up. That's the picture here. Suddenly the humans now rise up. And I want you to see that the big picture, the big statement, the verse that I think is the whole of the story for these 3 chapters, and this text right here, and for our lesson, is found there in verse 4. Because in verse 4, they have 2 concerns for themselves. Concern number 1, we want to make a name for ourselves. We want to make a name for ourselves. We want recognition. We want people to notice us. And I want us to think about how this goes directly against the prime directive that God has given humans. If you remember back in Genesis chapter 1, and verse 26 and 27, we spent a bit of time there because what God says is, let us make man, humanity, in our image after our likeness. And we noted there that that is a purpose statement, that people were created to represent God, to reflect the image of God. They are image bearers as they live on the earth. So we spent much of that time. I know we had a pandemic in the middle. It's been a while since we were there. But when we were at the beginning of Genesis, that was a really important message being reminded to us about, here's your purpose. You represent God. You bear God's image. And you have been put on the earth to then be that administrator and representative. And notice what they are doing. Their goal is not, let's represent God and let's make sure God gets glory. Their purpose is, let's make sure we get attention and we get glory. They are violating the prime directive given to humans. We will make a name for ourselves. And we'll talk more about this in a minute, but just take a moment and think about this. The problem of pride that I think all of us have to fight is the problem of we want attention. We want people's attention. We want people to pay attention to us. We want to have a good reputation. We want people to speak well of us. We want people to do things for us. We want to be remembered. We want people to know who we are. We want to have respect. It just seems to be this thing that we fight. And immediately you see the problem rising up is that paying attention to self and having people that give us attention as our primary concern goes against God's will, that He gets the attention and that He gets the glory. Their first concern is make a name for themselves. Notice the second concern is also stated in verse 4. At the very end of the verse, they don't want to be dispersed over the earth. This violates prime directive number 2. Verses 26 and 27, God said to humans, you are made in my image. meaning you are to reflect me. The very next thing God said was, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth with God's image. You weren't supposed to stay in one place. You were supposed to spread out and put God's name and God's glory spread throughout the earth. In fact, God reiterates that to Noah and his children, being fruitful and multiply and filling the earth. And so notice, their concern is to go against God's will. Let's make a name for ourselves, and let's do something to make sure that we are never dispersed and scattered throughout the earth, which is the second issue of pride. If pride, point one, is we want people to pay attention to us, pride, point two, is we think we can control our own destinies. We think we have power and that we are in charge. And we can control outcomes, and we can do as we please, that we can live our lives however we want. I think the last 3 months have reminded us that that's not true. Those last 3 months have reminded us you don't have control over your destiny, but pride says we do. We will control the future. We will control outcomes. We will be in charge of our lives, and we will do what we want to do, and we will live as we want to live, as if we have power over that. Well, that's the pride that is coming up here. These two concerns. We want to make a name for ourselves. We don't want to be dispersed. And we need to see that the very first thing we are seeing after the worldwide flood is humanity is rejecting their God-given mandates. Already. We're already seeing pride coming up. We are already seeing people going against the will of God. Even Noah and his children. Everybody is running up against God. And so the question that is now left hanging for us in all of this is, what is God going to do about it now? What's God going to do about this? God has already wiped out the earth, and wickedness has returned full force. As long as there are humans, there is going to be sin. And so now what is God going to do? Here is a group of people who are defying God. They are defying the will of God. They are saying, we will be in control, and we will make a name for ourselves, and we don't care about the glory of God, nor do we believe that God can stop us, for we are in charge. What's God going to do about that? Well, notice verse 6. The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they all have one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech. I want us to think about what God says right here for a moment. It's a striking statement. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Ever thought about God saying that? That's a strange one. Is God saying, oh no, we're afraid of humans because if we let them on and speaking one language, what will we ever do? How will we ever handle these people? It kind of sounds like that. We're like, that can't be what's happening. What is God saying at this moment? Well, think about the buildup of what has taken place. He says, if we allow them to continue in one language and stay together as one, do you know what they're going to do? They are going to bind themselves together and commit evil upon evil upon evil. It will be the whole world together as one, resisting God. And God says, I'm not going to let that happen. I am not going to allow the whole world to join together with a singular language so that they can come together and rebel as a single person against God. And so God's answer is given. I am going to confuse their languages so that they may not understand one another. And notice verse 8, the Lord dispersed them there all over the face of the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. God's concern was that people would come together and just decide they would always resist God. And so it's not that God has any trouble stopping their plans. He doesn't. He absolutely stops their plans. In fact, please notice the wording that is said there in verse 8, that the Lord dispersed them and they left off building the city. Can God stop them? Oh, He stopped them dead in their tracks. They think they've got all of these plans, and God goes, that is not what you're going to do. It's not that God is afraid of what humans will do, but that He's trying to get us to stop committing evil and stop rebelling against Him. He looks down at this city, and what do they want to do? With the power of having a single language and being able to function as a single people, what will they do with this opportunity? Make a name for themselves so that they don't have to do God's will. And God says, no. What you should have done with the opportunity to be a single group of people with a single language is to be God's representatives, spreading out over the earth, proclaiming the glory of God. But that's not what they wanted. That's not what they chose to do. And so what God does is He responds. If you've ever asked the question, why do we have different languages? And why do we have different cultures in different regions? The answer is, God did that. God did that. Because at a prior time, all humanity bound together as one with their one language said, we will rebel against God. And God said, no. I am not going to have the whole earth bind themselves together to rebel against God as a unit. I will scatter you, and I will divide you up, and I will give you different borders in different regions, in different cultures, in different languages, so that you can never do that. And that's what you have now. And the answer is given here. That's why chapter 10 was the outcome. Chapter 10 is saying, look at where they spread all over the place, and they all stayed within their own boundaries, and they all have their own language, and stayed with their own plans. Why? Because God made it that way. Because it was God's response to sin. Unfortunately, even as God gives a new hope in erasing the earth of wickedness, humanity is bent on doing evil. And we need somebody who's going to rescue us from our own sinful ways. Now, there are three things I want to observe from the text when talking about the problem of pride that we see here in Babel. I think it is important to see the first picture that is immediately given. It's the one that jumps off the page. It's the one that catches our attention. If you've grown up in the pews, you remember this account about the Tower of Babel. And I think it's important to think about what is being shown. That pride loves praise. The problem of pride is that it does want everybody's attention. That we want people to pay attention to us. And immediately it should be used as a warning. This is what God is doing, is giving us a warning here. If you are concerned about what people think, that's a pride problem. If you want this reputation, if you want people to think well of yourself and be concerned about you, they need to pay attention to you. They need to focus on you. They need to do things for you. That is pride. It says, I'm important, and people need to do things for me, and say things to me, do things for me, and think of me in certain ways. And I want us to think about how we live in a time where this is really, really hard. We live in a time where it is very simple to get everybody to want to pay attention to me. Probably an unprecedented time. There was no way to be able to do what we're able to do today in terms of, hey, everybody, look at me. Pay attention to me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at how amazing I am. I'm so smart. Or whatever nonsensical thing that we're trying to do. Is so often what we are doing through our time is simply trying to get people to glorify us. To glorify us. Pay attention to me. Say nice things about me. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me. And as Christians, we need to be really, really careful. And it is easy to say things, do things, post things, send things as a way for people to pay attention to us. Pride loves attention. Pride says, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at how important I am. If we are so concerned about what people think of us, how they're responding to us, we want to make sure that we do something and we all get thumbs up. Look at you, you're doing great, we like you. There's something that's a problem inside. It is a pride problem. It is saying, I want to know what everybody thinks. I want to know what they're saying about me. And I think the problem of pride is just so important here. I want you to think about what Ham does for a moment. Why does he go to his brothers and tell them about how his dear dad is lying naked and passed out on the ground in his tent? Why is he telling his brothers that? Attention. Think about how we do that. Hey, you won't believe what I saw. I saw da-da-da-da-da over there. That's what he's doing. Hey, guys, you won't believe what our dad did. He got drunk and he's passed out over there and he's completely naked. And what a dad. Unbelievable. Attention. It's an honorable thing that you see the other two brothers are not, that's hilarious. That's unbelievable. What a dumb dad we have. How doesn't he know that? They don't fall into that. They honor their father. They go and cover him up. It is so important that we realize our purpose is to draw attention to God, not draw attention to ourselves. Think about how we are told that in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 16. It's a reminder to us about that. That we are taught to do our works in a way so that God is glorified, not us. That our goal in life is not for people to pay attention to us, for them to see everything we are doing so that we get honor, we get glory, we get esteem, we get people to recognize us, we get people to pat us on the back. That's not why we're here. Our goal is to make sure that God is glorified in the things that we say and the things that we do. Remember what Jesus would say just a little bit after declaring that our purpose is that God would be glorified. Remember how we talked about as you do your good deeds, you make sure that your left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing? You ever thought about that picture? That you are doing things in such a godly way and is such a God-glorifying way that you're making sure nobody else is aware of it. In fact, to such a degree that the imagery, your left hand wouldn't even know what the right hand is doing, and the right hand would know what the left hand is doing. That's how concerned you are that it's not about what people think. It's not about what people say. It's not about getting a pat on the back or getting attention or making sure people know what you're doing and the good work you're doing. You're just making sure that God is glorified. To spin this another way, humility is basically wanting God to be praised. That's what humility looks like. Humility says, I don't care about me getting attention. I don't care about me getting praise. I want God to be praised. I want God to get the honor. The glory goes to Him. It does not come to me. So the first thing you see here with these people at the tower is that they love praise. They want people to magnify them, glorify them, give them attention. Let us make a name for ourselves. And God completely resists it. The second sin is here. It's not quite as obvious, but I want you to notice. I think because growing up in the pews as a kid, we always paid attention to the tower. They're going to make a tower up into the heavens. They're going to put it in the sky, and everybody's going to go, wow, look at them. They made such a big tower. What great technology that they have, that they could do these bricks this way, build it so high, and it'll never fall over, and wow, look at them. But there's another aspect of what they're saying. If you look at it in verse 4, verse 4 does not say, come, let us just build a tower and make a name for ourselves. There's a second aspect that says, come, let us build a city so that we will not be dispersed over the face of the earth. The tower is so everybody goes, wow, you guys can sure build a tower. What bricks were you using? That is some neat tech you have that you built a building like that. The city was so they would have security. We will never be dispersed over the earth. We will stay right here. Nobody will attack us, and we will always be safe in our city. We will never have to go anywhere. We'll just all hunker down right here, and we will be safe. And this is also the essence of pride. Pride loves security. Pride says, I can protect myself. I can take care of myself. I can provide for myself. And think about how that is presented in our culture today. Here's what I will do. I will make good decisions, and I will get an education so that I can get a job, so that I can make a lot of money, so that I can buy a house, and I can have a family, so I can enjoy this life, so that I can store up my wealth, so that I can retire one day, so that I can take my ease. That is the American dream. And that was the exact same story Jesus told about a rich fool who said the exact same thing. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do since I have nowhere to store my crops? And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns, and I will build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all my goods, and I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, retire, take it easy, or eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Pride says, I can protect myself. I can make my own security. I am in charge of my life. I can keep myself safe. And I can make myself rich, and I can make myself prosperous, and I can do all these things. And God can destroy that planning in a moment. I love verse 8. They just left the city there. All of these great plans. We're going to build this tower. We're going to build this city. And we're going to be safe, and we're going to be secure, and we're going to stay right here. And God said, no. And as we continue to go through this pandemic, we need to be reminded we don't have security in and of ourselves. That security has always been dependent upon God. That prosperity has always been dependent upon God. that health has always been dependent upon God. Everything that we enjoy and every blessing we have has always been dependent upon God. We lost sight of that in pride. Oh, it's because I'm so smart and my influence and my experience and my decisions and my work and my savings and my investments and how I did this and I. And that's what they were doing at Babel. They were saying, we can control this. We can control where we'll live and how long we stay here. We can control what we build and what we do. Which leads to really the hilarious part of the story. God knows if we have a pride problem. Let me show you why this is funny. Notice the picture that's given. The picture is, we will build a tower to the sky and make a name for ourselves and build a city of security so that we will never be dispersed. We are going to make something great. Look at verse 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower. That's hilarious. Do you see what God's doing? We're going to build something so big and so majestic and so powerful. And God goes, let me come down there and look at that. Oh, did you make a little tower down there? That's cute. Oh, you built a city. I'm going to come down and look at your big tower and city. We think we're so great. And God goes, let me come down and look at that. Yesterday was really cool with SpaceX. That is amazing. Shooting people to the space station, crazy cool. But you know God has to go, let me come down there and look at that. Oh, that was neat. Look at you guys. You got little rockets and shooting people in the sky. That's really neat. Good for you. We can't lose perspective of God here. As amazing of our technology, the things we can do and the things that we can build, God knows our pride, and anything that we do to elevate ourselves is so beneath God. It is so beneath Him. We think we're making a name for ourselves and we are doing something so fantastic. Friends, that's why we highlighted verse 3 in here. They said, hey, come, let's build some bricks together and build a tower. And it's going to be something amazing. And we go, here's what we're going to do. We're going to build all these really neat things. And God goes, let me come down and look at that. It's all beneath Him. God knows what we're doing. God knew that pride was the problem for these people. And so He comes down and goes, oh, you're trying to elevate yourselves. I'm going to oppose that. I'm going to resist you. Because you can't go up against God. That's why James says what he says. God opposes, resists the proud, and gives grace to the humble. I want to highlight that line for just a moment. I think that's so important for us to think about. When we are making our life about people paying attention to us, or trying to make our life as secure as possible, as if it's our power and knowledge, God is resisting us. He is opposing us. We look at it innocently. Oh, what's the big deal? You know, everybody says, look at me, look at me, look at me. Why don't you look at me? Everybody says, look at what I did, look at what I built, look at my life, look at my experience, look at my money, look at how I've made my life, look how I can sit back and take my ease and retire and say, you can't be married. Everybody does that. And God is saying, if that is your point of view, if that is your life, if it is about the praise of people, if it's about how you will be in charge, how you will control your own destiny, God says, I'm against you. I just ask, Do you want to live your life with God actively opposing you? Because that's what he says he's doing. God opposes the proud. He goes against pride. And here's a tremendous example of it. Everything these people thought they would accomplish, everything they thought that was great, everything they thought was important, God, in his snap of his fingers, just simply went, no. We've spent time over our past few weeks talking about everything that we have is only because God has said okay. We are breathing right now because God said okay. We have wealth because God said okay. We have health because God said okay. Everything that is in our lives is because God says okay. We have no control over that. We have only done it because of God. And this is being reminded to us of this picture here. Let me flip that sentence around. If God resists the proud, then we are only going to find grace when we strip away that pride. The only way we're accessing grace is in humility. God opposes the proud, therefore he's giving grace to those who say, I know that what I have in my life is not because I'm so smart or because I've made such good decisions or because I have such a great job or I married right or have this or have that or did this. It's because God has given it to me. That's when we get grace. We get grace when we say, who cares about me? And it's not about people paying attention to me. It's not about people giving me a pat on the back. It's not about people giving me recognition. It's not about thinking, why aren't people doing this for me, or thinking, or whatever it is that we want people to do. We don't care what people think. We care about what God thinks. We want God to be glorified, and not us. God opposes the proud. He resists the proud. But he gives grace to the humble. May we think about the sin of pride. And think about how easy it is to be caught up in that. Our culture is saturated in it. Our culture is filled with I. Let's be like Noah's others 2 sons that were able to resist and say, we're not going to act like what you're doing. We're going to do what's honorable. We're going to do what's holy. We're going to do what's right. We will reflect the glory of God and show that his attention is more important than everyone else's. Let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, what can we possibly say except forgive us for the pride that we so easily allow into our hearts? Forgive us for when we have not reflected your glory. Forgive us for when we have not drawn everyone's attention to you. Forgive us for when we've lived lives desiring the praise of people. Forgive us for thinking that everything we have is because of our own hatred or our own knowledge or experience. God, forgive us for these prideful thoughts. Forgive us for when we've spoken proudly. Forgive us for when we have tried to make a name for ourselves, draw attention to ourselves, or act like anything is about us. Lord, not only do we pray for forgiveness, we pray for a greater awareness and a greater fight against pride. Lord, we need your grace. We do not need your resistance. So, Lord, we pray for humility. We pray that we would think rightly about ourselves. That we would think rightly about other people. That we would look upon every individual and us when we don't. Forgive us for elevating ourselves above over others. Forgive us for thinking that we're more important than someone else. Lord, thank you for your Son. Through his sacrifice, we can be forgiven of our wicked thoughts and deeds. Help us to go forward in humility and not in pride. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
We will sing the invitation song. We do invite you to think about your situation. If you need to respond to the